bell for the end of the school day may have rung, but the learning doesn't end there. This is your geography revision session. We're covering Year 7, Module 3, Changing Population. I'm Mr. S, and I'll be your revision tutor. Around the world, the population is changing, and we're not just talking about the number of people alive today, which is getting bigger. The average ages and the gender balances of different countries around the world is also in constant change. As always, we have 5 elements to look at, so let's start with population structures. A population structure is looking at how our population or how a population of an area is set up. So what are the male, what are the female numbers, how many people are in different age ranges. It also considers how many people are being born and how many new people are dying. The graph that I've got in front of us is called the Demographic Transition Model, also abbreviated to DTM. And this tells us what the birth rate of the area is, which is represented on this graph by this green line, what the death rate is, which is represented by the blue line, and then we've got an area in between. And the bigger this area is, then the more people are being born, because this birth rate is much higher than the death rate. It could also be the other way around, and we could have a death rate that's higher than the birth rate, and then we'd have less people being born. So this is called the natural increase when there's more births than deaths, and if it was the other way around, it would be called the natural decrease when we have more deaths than births. And then we have a final line here. This orange one represents the total population. So as the gap between the birth and the death rate increases, then so our population also increases, because that's the number of people who are staying alive throughout that time. So you can see here the definitions that I've been mentioning. So birth rate being the number of births per 1,000 people. So it's a bit like looking at a percentage, but out of 1,000 instead of 100. The same for death rate, the number of deaths per 1,000. The natural increase when the birth rate is higher than the death rate. And then the natural decrease when the birth rate is lower than the death rate. You'll also notice that we've got this graph split up into something called stages, so stage 1 through to stage 5. These represent how developed a country or a region is. So stage 1 means that both the birth rate and the death rate are really high. So people are having lots of babies, but also lots of people are dying very often. So you can see there that the population is really low and it doesn't go up, it just seems to stay really flat because we've got as many births as we have deaths, even though both of them are really high. Now, there aren't many places around the world now that are like that, but we do have some examples of tribes that live out in the Amazon rainforest and in Indonesia where they are like this. And the reason for this is, well, there's a lot of high birth rate because a lot of people die, so people have to replace those children really quickly. And there's a high death rate because these areas won't have any sort of education for their health. They'll have no access to healthcare or medical care, no drugs and things like that. So the death rate's going to be really high too. As we move into stage 2, you can see here that the birth rate stays really high, but the death rate starts to drop off really quickly. So what's happening here is we're starting to see some more education going in and some healthcare going in, which is going to reduce the death rate. But the birth rate has remained the same because it's part of the cultural expectation, and the people of these areas are probably farmers, so they're going to need lots of people to work the land. And you can see the gap between these two is increasing, so our total population has increased. And an example of this, again, we don't have many, but a good example is Ethiopia. And then we move into stage 3. Now this is where a lot of our NICs are, so newly industrialized countries. And these are countries where they're starting to get more developed. They've got good healthcare and education systems, which means that now their birth rate is also going to start to drop. This is because that healthcare means that people are living for longer, so you don't need to have big families anymore. And the type of employment that people are doing is probably going to change as well. So there won't be as many people working on farms and probably more people working in factories and in call centres and things like that. So you don't need to have a big family. So what this means is that the gap between the two is remaining the same. So our population is going to start leveling off. It's not going to rise up quite as quickly. And we've got some examples of India and Brazil for this. And then going into stage 4, this is where we are. And you can see here our birth rate has really started to drop off. And it's coming very close to our death rate. So this means that our population isn't increasing very much at all. So you can see here that our total population is almost flat by the end of stage 4. And some of the reasons for this are that a lot of people are now looking for more of an expansion of their lifestyle, so they don't want to spend as much money on children, or maybe they're getting married later, or they're focusing on their jobs, so they're having children much later and not having as many. And we also have a lot more people living for longer, which I'm going to touch on upon in a minute. And then we have what's called stage 5. And this is a new stage, and there's not many countries in it. Germany and Japan. The UK is probably almost about to go in it, but we're not there yet. Now, this graph doesn't represent it very well, because what could also happen, here you can see that the natural increase starts to go back up again. But it could also, this birth rate could drop down underneath the death rate, which would mean that the population of Germany and Japan might start to decline. This line up here might not go back up, it might come down. And the reason for that is they've got a lot more people who are elderly and fewer people who are of younger family and children age, which means that they're not going to have as many people who can create families, essentially. And there's more of a lifestyle around being independent without children. And then you'll notice at the bottom here that we have some graphs. These are called population pyramids, and they represent the population that we've been discussing here. The blue and the pink sides represent the population of male and female, and how far up this graph goes represents how long people are living for. So that's the life expectancy, which is the average age somebody's expected to live to. On stage 1, you can see that the bottom of the pyramid, the base of it, is really, really wide. So this means that there's a lot of babies being born. But it's got this curved side, which means by the time we reach 15, almost half of the population has died off by the age of 15. And then there is very few people that reach to 65 or above. So this curve represents a lot of people dying very quickly. As you move into stage 2, you can see that the curve has disappeared into straight sides. This means more people are living beyond the age of 15 in this case. And there's more people living past 65 as well. As we move into stage 3, you can see the base has started to flatten out. So this means that we're going to have less children being born now, and that's represented on our graph up here. And the life expectancy is roughly the same as it has been in stage 2 in this graph. And then we move into stage 4, you can see that there's a lot more people now living until they're above 65, so that's above where I've got my marker here. And it's rounded at the top, it's not a peak. So that means that we've got a lot more people up here, because if it was a peak, there'd be very few. It's very shallow there. So this is rounded, represent there's a lot more people living to that age. And on this graph, for stage 5, you can see that the base here is started to widen a bit more. This is representing this increase in birth rate. But if, as I said, this graph isn't very well represented because it should also have a line coming down here as well. So that means that if it was the other case, then it would actually curve in at the bottom here, representing fewer births instead. Next up, we have aging populations. We're going to have a look at one example, and we're looking at basically at stage 4 and stage 5 on the DTM, which is represented as this part of the population pyramid. So we have a straight base and we have a really wide peak representing people are living for longer, and we have a lot more people at the top of this pyramid, so people over the age of 65. And that's an aging population. So many countries across the world have what is known as an aging population. An increase in the average age of the population and an increasing proportion of people living in an old age because of that increased life expectancy and a decreased death rate. So we've got a narrow base, low birth rate, very tall, representing a high life expectancy, and it's very flat sides, which means that there's nobody really dying earlier on. So why is this the case? Why do we have an aging population? Well, we've got a low birth rate because we have a lot of contraception is available if we're considering the UK. Family planning, so knowing about contraceptives and safe sex. Education, particularly for women. So in the UK, education is a universal platform available to everybody, whether you're male or female, but that's not always the case depending on the country, which means that women may have children later in life, and people may marry later in life, because women can now women can go on to have an education and go to work, which is not always the case in some countries, as I've just said. And there's less deaths and little labour needed, so families have fewer children. So in the UK, we don't really have huge amounts of farming. People don't work land, so you don't need a big family to grow the crops. There is a higher life expectancy because we have a fantastic healthcare system. The NHS is free at the point of use. That means that you don't have to pay if you turn up at the hospital and you're a UK citizen or an EU citizen. And that means we're going to have less deaths. And we have a good education system, which means that you know how to keep yourself healthy because you go through PHSE programs. And your education means that you're more likely to go on and earn enough money to survive in your later life. Now, there's an advantage of having an ageing population, and people are living for longer, enjoying healthier, fuller lives. Older people often work for longer. They don't always retire when they have to, and they go on to benefit society by providing labour, but also they volunteer once they reach retirement age. And they may do that formally through charities, but they could also do it by looking after grandchildren, for example, so childcare for free. So the younger retired people contribute a lot to the economy. They have a reasonable amount of money, either that they've saved up or from pensions, which can be used for their leisure time, which means they're putting money back into the economy. And it's something which is called the grey pound. They're contributing money to the economy through their leisure and through their daily activities. But a lot of the ageing population is focused on the disadvantages, and there are a few. Now, as people get older, they need to use healthcare more. So it puts a strain on the healthcare services and the social care services in our country. As people are living for longer, their pension, which is a bit of money that the government pays out every week to people once they've retired, well, if you've got a longer life expectancy, it means that you've got to pay that money out for longer as well. So that's going to create a pension crisis, or it is creating a pension crisis, where there's not enough money to cover the increasing amount of pensions as our ageing population, the amount of pensioners, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And less people are now of working age, which means that we don't have as many people working in jobs, and so they don't earn money to pay taxes, and therefore the government doesn't have as much money to use to fund schools, hospitals, or even pay those pensions. So what has the UK done? Well, you and me will not be retiring at 65 as other people have done in the past. The pension age was raised to 67. It's also been raised for everybody. Women used to be able to retire at 60. So the pension age has been levelled out at 67 for everybody, and it may go up again. And that's going to help because it means the government doesn't have to start paying the pensions until later on, so they get to save a bit of money. It also means that people are working for longer as well, so they're paying more taxes. The government's also been trying to increase the fertility rate, so that's increasing the amount of babies that women have on average. And they've done that by creating child benefits. So that's a weekly payment that parents get for having children. And you get money for the first and second child that you have. Improved maternity leave for women and men. So you get maternity leave for women and you get paternity leave for men. And you can share that across both partners, which means that whoever wants to take the leave to look after the children can do. So it's going to be more of an incentive for women to have children. And you get health and pregnancy grants, money to help during your pregnancy. And then we've also got increased immigration. The UK has worked hard to try and encourage more young professionals to come to the country. That means that they're encouraging more people of working age to come into the country and pay and earn money and pay taxes. And it also means that these young people may also end up having a family in the UK, which is going to increase the amount of babies being born and hopefully in the future mean that we have a larger working population and therefore bring more taxes from employment and more births for future workers. Next up is migration, and we touched upon it in ageing population because it's what the UK has been trying to encourage. But part of changing population is the fact that people do move. So we have this word immigration, which means the movement of population from one area to another. So that could be moving within a country. So let's say you move from Hebburn down to London for a job. That's migration. But equally, you could move from Hebburn to Australia for a job. And that's also migration. And there are two types of migrants. So a migrant is a person who moves. And you can be an economic migrant. So you're moving because you want a better job. or you want a better quality of life, or you want to go and live with your family somewhere else. You're doing it by choice, basically. And then there are forced migrants. And these are moving because they have a risk to their life. So it could be due to something like famine, where there's not enough food to go around, so you've had to move. It could be because there's war in your country, or it could be because there's a natural disaster that's just occurred and wiped out part of the infrastructure, or it could be due to persecution. Your religion, your ethnicity is at odds with the people who run the country, and so you've had to flee because you might end up in jail just because you are the person that you are. So why do people move? We have two factors that we need to consider. There are something called push factors. So push factors are why you're leaving the place that you're from. Okay, so if you're from Heaven and you're going to Australia, why don't you want to live in Heaven anymore? And then there are pull factors. And they're why you're going to the country or the place you're going to. So again, why do you want to go to Australia and not somewhere else? Or why do you not want to stay in Heaven? So push factors tend to be the negatives. And you can think of things like unemployment. It's not safe. There's a lack of services, so you can't get a good education or good healthcare. There may be poverty in the area, so there's not much money to be had. Drought, civil war, which is a country fighting within itself. Natural hazards, or you feel isolated, you're on your own. And therefore, that's why you want to leave that area. The pull factors are the positives. Why do you want to go to that place? There may be more employment, more opportunities for employment. It might be safer, or you may feel safer in that area. Access to services such as good education and good healthcare. Opportunities to make more money. So there may be opportunities in the job that you've trained in another country, but you don't have that opportunity at home for whatever reason. Good supplies of resources, so there's enough food and water should you move there. There's a more stable government, so you're not going to see a quick change in government, which may mean that your opinions or your views or your religion suddenly become at odds with the new government, or they keep changing the rules constantly. That tends to be more democratic governments, so ones that are voted in as opposed to ones that are just assigned by a person. Fewer risks from natural hazards, and your friends, family or community might live there. What are the advantages then and the disadvantages? Right, there are two sides to this. We can talk about the country of origin, so that's where that person's come from. Where's their home country? And then there's the host country. That's where they're going to or where they're living now. So the positives for migration in the country that they've come from, well, it may reduce the pressure on their natural resources if it's overpopulated because they've moved somewhere else. Migrants can send money home. So a lot of lower skilled migrants, particularly if you think of like Eastern European countries, come to the UK to make some money, and it's legal to do so, and they'll maybe do some crop picking and stuff like that, and they'll send money home to help the family back home. And they can also return with knowledge. So they may come to the UK and do a bit of work and learn how to do something, and then they can go back home and take that training home and help the home country. The positives for the host country, so what the country that they've gone to, well, a lot of people come because there's a gap in the market. So if we take that crop picking, we have a lot of Eastern Europeans, such as Polish people, coming over to pick crops. And that's because people in the UK don't want to do it. It's not a high-paid job, and therefore we need people to do it, or we wouldn't have the food, so we get people in from the other countries to do it. Services like healthcare benefit, we have a lot of EU nurses, and we have a lot of Asian, East and Southeast Asian nurses in the NHS. And if they weren't there, our NHS wouldn't be able to survive. Because again, nursing is an underappreciated job, and it's not as well paid as other types of jobs, so not a lot of people actually end up going into nursing. And it also provides government tax revenues. If these people are coming in to work, then they're going to pay taxes, and that's going to provide the government with enough money to spend on infrastructure and social projects, paying for hospitals, schools, keeping the streetlights on, and things like that. But there are negatives for both. For the country of origin, well, that country is losing a lot of skilled people. They're moving somewhere else to get a better job. So that country is training them up, and that costs money, but then they're leaving and not paying back. And that's called the brain drain. They're paying less taxes because there's not as many workers in the country anymore. And then there's a gender imbalance, as it's often males who migrate to another country for work, leaving more females in the host country. And then more females in the country of origin. For the host country, it can put a lot of pressure on services such as housing and infrastructure, as you've got more people living in that country now. There can be language and cultural barriers. They may not necessarily speak the same language, which then means that the government has to put things in place to try and support, either with language programs, or it could be through having to put additional signage up in different languages. And the cultural barriers might mean that there is conflict or clashes with the people of the host country. And that leads to some friction and some racism, which can flare up between host populations and migrant groups. Next, we have a youthful population. So this is the opposite of the aging population that we looked at in 7.3.2. You can see the youthful population's population pyramid has very angled sides, representing that there is an increase in death as we go further up the population pyramid. It's very peaked, which means that there's not many people at the top of the pyramid, but it's got a very wide base representing lots of people being born. Many countries have a youthful population because they have a higher birth rate, and that death rate is starting to slowly decrease. We're at an area probably between stage 2 and stage 3 where the death rate has really started to drop. The population has a wide base representing that birth rate increase and a taller it's taller, so the life expectancy is starting to increase, but it's also got that straight sides representing that steady death rate, as I've just mentioned. And the reason for that, well, as we move into stage 2 into stage 3, we have an increase in healthcare and education programs as the country started to make a bit of money from manufacturing, which means that they can then develop those, which will decrease the death rate. They still have a high birth rate though, as they still need a lot of children to work on farms, because that's still going to be a large staple of the economy. They're still going to have a lot of fruit and crop growing. But because the death rate is still particularly high as well, the chances of infant mortality rate, so that's the number of babies dying, the number of children dying before the age of 1, means that we also have the need for for more children, because there will still be some dying. The advantages of having a youthful population are that you've got lots of potential future workers. It means that you're not going to run out of taxes, because you're always going to have some workers around, because those children will grow up to work. Natural resources or industries do need a lot of labour in stage 2 and stage 3, because it tends to be mining, farming, fishing that require lots of people, and therefore you've got a plentiful supply of workers to do that, and it generates a lot of money for the country in terms of taxes. But again, a youthful population is also going to bring some negatives. Lots of children are reliant on parents or adults, and if you've got lots of children but few adults, that's going to put a strain on the ability for the government, these adults, to provide for their needs. A lot of the taxes generated by that country need to be spent on this dependent population, so they'll have to spend that money on healthcare, they'll have to spend that money on education of these children. And vital services such as health, education, sanitation can suffer because we've got so many dependents using them, and not as much tax is available because it's all being spent on other things, because they've got such a youthful population. So what have people done? Well, we have improving the quality and the quantity of schooling, meaning that everybody can end up in school, and that's important because it also ensures that there's a minimum quality of standard for living, so people know how to keep themselves healthy, but it also shows an educated workforce is less likely to have a large family. They want to go on and get a better career, and therefore they put off having children till later on. But they're also educated on why having a smaller family is better. Laws are put into place to try and prevent early marriage, and that means that girls who marry later in life have less children. In a lot of LIC, so low-income countries, marriage happens very early on in a young girl's life, which means that she has a longer period of childbearing as well. And then we have improvements in the job market. So easing the barriers to start work and encourage more flexible hiring and job mobility means that you're going to have equal access to employment both male and female, because you want your girls to work as well, so it means that they're more likely to have children later, but it also means that you've got a fairer society. So encouraging private sector firms to invest in training and hiring means that you're going to have less children overall. Finally, we have how does one country manage its population? And we're going to focus on China. China was very popular in terms of managing population because it did something really, really extreme, something that no other country had done. By 1979, the country had had a few famines. Its population was growing massively. Today, the world's population, it has 1/7 of the world's population. So we have 7 billion people on our planet, and 1 billion of those are in China or Chinese. So in the 60s and 70s, China suffered from widespread famines. They couldn't produce enough food for their growing populations, so they started something called the one-child policy, which was introduced in 1979. And the policy is what it sounds like. Every family could only have one child. But they must also ask permission from their bosses, so that where they work, to have that child as well. You can't get married, and therefore you can't have children. In this communist state, they're very led by the government, so you couldn't have children outside of wedlock. You had to be 24 before you could get married, and therefore you had to be 24 before you could have children, which is going to delay the fertility period of that woman. And they put incentives in place. So if you only had one child, then you could have a salary rise from 5 to 10%. And if you stuck to that one child, and there were also negatives involved. So if you had more than one child, then your salary went down. And there was a whole host of issues with this, which we're going to look at now. So the problems, well, if women had more than one child, they were persuaded very early on in the program to have late abortions into the 7th month. Remember, pregnancy is only for 9 months, and therefore that was very close time, and it's something that is illegal in most countries to have an abortion so close to the due date. Female infanticide. This is basically where girls were killed or aborted because they were girls. So in Chinese culture, having a male child was seen as being better because they were carrying on the family name, and it's the male child that also looks after the parents when they get too old. So Chinese society favours sons, which meant that if they could only have one, then there was a lot of abortions going on when they found out they were having a girl. And this led to a significant gender imbalance where there was a significantly higher proportion of males in society compared to females. And there's this syndrome called the Little Empress syndrome, so where Chinese boys became so spoilt because they were seen as their little saviour, their one child that they could have, and it was a boy, and so they were spoilt from it. There were benefits from this policy though. It did produce desired results. It reduced the increase in population. China hasn't suffered from a famine since. It's introduced 400,000 million fewer people to their society. And controlling the population has allowed China to develop and reduce the strain on public services such as school and hospitals, and it's become one of the most dominant economic forces today. And the standard of living of the people of China has increased. But China has had to make some changes. So because the policy has produced such an increased gender imbalance, it means China has had to change some of its policies. They introduced things like you can't get a sonogram to find out the sex of the child. It was illegal to have an abortion based on the sex of the child. And that was done very early on in the program. But in recent decades, they've also reduced it in terms of if you work out in the countryside, you can have 2 children because you need more people to work the farms. It's also allowed younger couples to have 2 children now, and in some cases they've actually completely removed the policy, but if you work in the government you are still expected to follow it. So it's been too much of a success for China because it means now that their population has become imbalanced and unstable and likely to collapse in on itself. So they've had to reduce the policy significantly since they introduced it in 1979. That's it for today, but don't forget to complete the home study questions to test yourself. Goodbye.